Creating your own reality. Is it possible for me? I am Jennifer K. Hill, the Consciousness Architect, and I am here to tell you that it's not only possible, it's closer than you might think. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to another episode of Regarding Consciousness. I am Jennifer K. Hill, CEO of OptiMatch and Cosmic Connector, who loves to delve into consciousness with all of our incredible entrepreneurs, authors, scientists, and thought leaders from around the world. Today's topic is one that we touched on lightly a couple of months back with another brilliant entrepreneur, Christina Wise, and I want to delve in a bit further to today's guest, who is going to be talking to us about Unbreakable. Today we have Mike Brown joining us. Mike has had his own entrepreneurial journey of ups and downs that I'm sure he'll share a little bit about during today's show. He's been an investor, prior retired from the Navy. Thank you for your service, Mike, on that. And now is a wealth coach of Unbreakable Wealth. Mike, it's such a pleasure to have you on here. I'm so happy that I got to hear your prolific talk at Baby Bathwater several months ago, and grateful to share your wisdom today with our listeners.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here and look forward to diving in.
Yeah, so Unbreakable Wealth, we're just going to jump onto that. What does that mean? What is Unbreakable Wealth?
Yeah, for me, it really means capturing the feeling that we all are really aspiring to when it comes to money. Because ultimately, I think most of us know at this point that money for money's sake is empty. So it's really diving one level deeper and going, okay, if it's not money for money's sake, if that's not going to make me happy, what truly is? And how do I use my money as a tool to capture that feeling I'm after? And I think that the ultimate human question really comes down to safety. Am I safe? And so if we can actually elicit that feeling of safety in the way that we want to feel using our money as a tool to build the life that we want to build, that's what I help people do.
Mm. How did this become your passion and your journey? I know you shared a little bit when we were at the talk together in Big Bathwater. I'd love for you to share with our listeners and viewers a little bit now.
And this is very much born of my own experience. And I say from stage, but it's really true. The day that I sold my company, I thought I'd never be unhappy again. I did all the things that I was supposed to do, right? I worked hard in school. I went to a good college. I went to the Navy. I was tested in combat. I came back. I built a company. I sold that company. Like I did all of the things that our society wants us to do. And yet the day after I sold my company, I woke up and I wasn't any different. And beyond that, 2 years later, after I sold my company for a life-changing amount of money, should have never had to work again, I find myself more stressed out. There's days I don't even want to get out of bed because I am hemorrhaging money, losing $100,000 a month. And I'm staring at the ceiling, like wondering, how did I get here? And it's really that pain that from there, I was able to create what I'm doing now and help people avoid that part of the journey. And it turns out it's so common, not just for post-exit founders, but for successful entrepreneurs to get to the place that they thought they wanted to get to, that was going to make them happy and filled up and aligned. And all of a sudden they wake up and go, wait a minute, is this all there is? And that's very much what happened to me. And by rewiring my subconscious and understanding the limiting beliefs and understanding the self-sabotage that led to me getting there, now I'm able to share that pain with others and open up about my story and really just show people the way to avoid that particular part of the journey.
How do we avoid it, Mike? What is the secret for anybody out there, whether you're an entrepreneur yourself, whether you're somebody who's made money and lost it? So many people have gone through bankruptcies in their life. In fact, we were just talking about Justin Breen, our guest right before you, who was on last week. And Justin always says the secret to being a visionary is you have to go bankrupt or one of three other things. I think he shares it on the show. And so talk a little bit about that. Why do we have this roller coaster of wealth, and how do we shift that roller coaster into what you call unbreakable?
Yeah, the first part is awareness, understanding that, and I'll use the analogy of building a company, is that it often takes a different person to go from 0 to 1 and 1 to 10. Some people are really good at wearing all the hats, burning the boats, pushing through whatever comes their way. But then when we get to that $10 million, $20 million mark, or we want to scale to 9 figures, It's a completely different skill set. You're shifting hats. Now you are a visionary CEO building a team of people that are smarter than you. And that's very different than burn the boats. I do everything myself and I'm scrappy. And the same thing happens with our wealth building journey. So we start off as accumulators of wealth. And many of us are very good at making money, but keeping money is a completely different story. And the thing is, it makes sense because as we're starting off in our entrepreneurial journey, like we get very used to having our backs against the wall and not knowing if we're going to make payroll this month. And all of a sudden we get really comfortable being uncomfortable. And then what happens is that bleeds over into our personal life. So now as soon as money comes in, we deploy our capital as soon as our bank account starts to fill up. All of these behaviors that are normalized because they're part of the entrepreneurial journey, but they're not necessarily the best decisions for our long-term self. And so it's really shifting our mindset from being an accumulator of wealth to a defender of wealth.
Okay, my mind has been blown. Let's back up and talk about accumulating versus defending wealth. I know I've been there as a CEO and I've talked candidly to people about it, and I coach a lot of entrepreneurs about it because there are times. I remember there was one time I was down to pennies and cents running my last company where you're certainly not taking a salary. It's funny for any of you out there wondering about the consciousness of what it's like to be an entrepreneur. I remember I thought I was a hot little piece of SHIT when I was like in my 20s and making millions of dollars for the first company I ever worked for them. And then I thought, oh, I can do this, no problem. What you don't realize though is the overhead, the insurance, the stress, the sleepless nights that the executives have, and those times, and I say times because it's not singular, it's multiple, where you get down to $0 or you're paying people basically on credit cards and just trying to cobble together money. So what is this accumulating versus defending wealth scenario?
Yeah, totally. I think it comes down to risk because if hard work was all that it took to be wealthy, there'd be a whole lot more rich people because there's a lot of people that are working very hard. But it's leveraging that work and usually that comes through some sort of risk. And that's why entrepreneurs, they're looking for something different rather than trading their time for money. So they're taking the risk, like you just talked about, of paying people on credit cards and scraping it together and trying to figure it out to get that product market fit stage. And then once we hit that, often it can accelerate really quickly where all of a sudden we went from scraping it together overnight to now making 30, 40, 50, who knows how much money we're making every month. And now it's, oh my God, what do I do now? Like, where do I put this? And a few things happen. Number one, because we got there by taking risk, we tend to just continue to take on more risk and go, okay, I'll invest in my other friend's company who's doing the sleepless night payroll on credit card thing because that's how I made my money. So that makes sense for me to go invest in that. When in reality, that is just taking money you've already made. And a mentor of mine had a great quote that I love, which is don't make it twice. Like, I've already made this money. I need to go redeploy this into something that's completely safe and it can grow without me. And I'm not going to go tap into that and take another risk as opposed to go invest it in another company that's going through the same phase as I am right now. So that's the first thing is we tend to deploy our capital into other people's companies because we think that's the quickest way to grow wealth. When the reality is, if you have a business that's working, you have a vehicle for beating the market. Your business is the best investment that you can ever make because it's a known quantity. You know how to have a force multiplier and get a return on your dollars, either through your own control or through scaling your product, like whatever that is, you have a vehicle for beating the market. So we don't need to take money from our primary business and then go find a new risky vehicle to beat the market. We just need to match the market. So that whether that's with real estate or an S&P 500 index fund, like this should be as low maintenance and as low risk as it possibly can. And we just need to stack that wealth over there while we concentrate on accelerating our primary business. But what happens is we get shiny object syndrome. Like once our business starts to get to that stable place, now we go, oh, I'm going to go build a portfolio of rental properties. And people are taking time away from their best investment. And they're redistributing that time over to their rental house where they're not an expert, where it's very capital intensive, where they have that whole new learning curve. And now all of a sudden, they are actually allocating their resources in the wrong spot and they're going to learn a whole new business, which is a business in of itself. So what I really try and teach people to do is, hey, concentrate on your primary business at all costs. Don't get distracted and redeploy your capital over here into something that's safe that can grow without you.
Mm. What role does all this have, Mike, to do with our limiting beliefs? I know we got a little bit into this when we were together in Cabo San Lucas at this mastermind we were at. A lot of it, I remember the first time I looked at this personally was 12, 15 years ago, and somebody had me write a money journal to look at all the big money experiences I'd ever had in my life and to write them in an Excel spreadsheet and what the beliefs were. I would imagine that to some level, our beliefs and our consciousness, whether we're making good investments or bad investments with our money or with our time, our beliefs are really going to shape how our money future and our wealth future turns out.
Absolutely. And the thing is, if information was all that we needed, again, there'd be a whole lot more rich people because there is a wealth of information, no pun intended, out there about how we should be investing, and nobody follows it. And the reason nobody follows it is because there are underlying beliefs that are circulating below the surface that are keeping us from taking all of that good advice.
Mm,
And that's what I call our money stories. Our money stories basically are the subconscious patterns that were created during childhood or adolescence, maybe from watching our parents relate to money, maybe for something traumatic like a bankruptcy that happened earlier in our life. And those things that happen shape how we deal with money now. Even if we're in a period of abundance, those stories are going to keep showing up unless we pay attention, unless we get really quiet with ourselves and go, okay, what do I believe about money to be true? And how is that showing up in my life now? Then we can start unwinding some of things and actually repatterning our brain to make better decisions. But until we do that work, most likely we're just going to keep doing the same things over and getting the same results and wondering why it's not working better.
mm. I have 2 different directions we can go here. All right, I'm being told to go a different direction. So one of the things is about, like, how it feels for us. What does success feel like? And it's a little bit different for each person. Like you said, you had this life-changing amount of wealth that came in. And yet you felt even sadder, and it's interesting. There was another from a Kabbalistic standpoint, I often drop in a little bit of Kabbalistic wisdom here that I've learned from my teachers, and I love that one of the analogies they say is that it's if you imagine that you have a light bulb, right? And you have a 100-watt light bulb, and you try to plug it into 1,000 watts of light, it's not gonna work. It's gonna short circuit, right? So you need to be able to have the capacity to hold this, which I think is what you're talking about in terms of breaking down these old structures. That's why, if you look at it historically, people who have won large amounts of wealth in Vegas or lottery or whatever very quickly lose it if they don't actively work on their consciousness, actively work on these old limiting money stories. Money's the root of all evil, whatever it is that we're all bombarded with from a media environmental standpoint from a very young age. It's all cultural, of course, too. Different cultures have different perspectives on money. So, how do we, number one, ascertain it? Is it as simple as sitting down quietly and just writing a journal about it? Number two, then, what are the next immediate steps that we take once we've realized and brought our awareness to the fact that, oh crap, I have this limiting belief that my dad stole my piggy bank when I was 3 years old, therefore it's not safe to save money or whatever it is?
Yeah, that's a great question. And first of all, it really does come down to identifying or creating awareness. And so what I teach is what I call the AI loop, and it's not that kind of AI. It's a four-step loop, which is awareness, insight, action, integration. So the first step is awareness. Okay, my every time my bank account fills up, I find myself either frivolously spending or deploying my capital into risky investments or whatever it is. I can't seem to keep a full bank account. I tend to put my back against the wall in order to elicit high performance, right? That's exactly what I was doing. So my bank account would fill up. I'd spend my money as fast as I possibly could because I knew if I was comfortable, I would be lazy or I wouldn't work hard anymore. So I would create this false pressure. And I found myself in this cycle of doing this over and over again. Okay, so that's the awareness. Next is insight. Okay, where is this actually coming from? And that's the piece I think that you're talking about of let's go back into our story. Let's figure out where this is coming from and identify either a place in our childhood or adolescence that shaped this belief or behavior. And look, we only have patterns for one reason, and it's to keep us safe. So there was some situation early on where this behavior actually kept us safe.
Mm,
So at one point, this behavior served us, and then our brain basically pattern that in of, okay, this is what I do in order to keep myself safe. And so then what happens is later on, we actually need a behavioral shift in order to become the next better version of ourselves. But we have this wiring that is continuing to run that same programming. And so unless we identify where it came from and why it was keeping us safe, we're unable to actually repattern that and shift into that new way of being. And the thing is about personal development, and I'm sure you've seen this, is we love to get stuck at insight. We love to mine our childhood for all the stories and patterns and be like, oh, my mom said this to me when I was 11, and that's why I do this thing. And we think that we're done, right? We found the gem. But action is actually the most important step on the loop, because without action, none of the rest of this actually does anything for us. So now it's creating an action that is tied to repatterning that loop and finding a new way of being. And action could be anywhere from just like we were talking about, doing a journal exercise and writing out new patterns that we want to create. It could be one that I like to recommend is actually a 30-second meditation. So, hey, if I find myself falling into an old pattern that I'm aware of and I have insight to where it came from, I can close my eyes, I can take 3 breaths, and I can ask myself 3 questions. Number 1, is this true or is this real? Do I need to engage in this behavior in order to keep myself safe? The second question is, how old is this? Where did this come from? So how old is this? Going back to that time when this actually did keep us safe. And then number 3, what do I need to feel safe right now in this instance? And to answer number 3, you can either go external or internal. We can go to, I could ask my wife, hey, is this right? Is this real? And get reassurance from them. Or I can go internal and create my own reassurance and safety. Okay. If we do that enough times, now we start to repattern our brain to get to that 4th step, which is integration. And that means I don't actually have to go into this meditation anymore. The new programming pops up automatically, and I've actually shed the old story. But it's a loop. It's not a 4-step process, right? And the reason it's a loop is because often that story will keep showing up again and again in a more insidious and harder to spot way. And so the game is that it's not that we're ever completely healed or rid of this thing. It's just how fast can I recognize when I'm falling back into this old thing? That's the steps that I walk people through.
It is. It all comes back to consciousness and awareness and how we integrate the two, because our awareness is what allows us to have those aha moments. Oh, wow, that's not what I'm committed to. I think that's a really great question. One of my mentors taught me many years ago. Is this what you're committed to? And if it is, don't listen to Mike. Don't listen to me. Keep doing it. If it's what you're committed to, clearly it's working for you. When I was running the recruiting company years ago, I would look at thousands and thousands of resumes. And the first question I would ask somebody is, okay, for every 10 resumes you're sending out, are you getting 3 or more interviews? If the answer is yes, don't go around asking other people for advice. It's if you're okay, if you're grounded in it, then stop trying to fix something that's not broken. So number 1 is the awareness, and then the consciousness to keep tapping that in. Are we living an unconscious life where we're constantly falling back into these old patterns? Or how quickly, to your point, Mike, can we catch ourselves in that moment? Oh, I'm about to go spend 10,000 or $100 or whatever is an uncomfortable amount for you. And that's coming out of my grocery fund this month or whatever it might be. Is that what I'm committed to go bet on this company or gamble or whatever it might be, whatever that risk taking scenario is? What is your recommendation, Mike, when you catch yourself in the moment having that same repetitive, oh crap, it's happening again. I'm about to repeat that pattern. What is your way that you teach clients how to redirect?
Yeah. So there's a few things. And what we've talked about a lot so far is this risk pattern. And that was mine, but that's not everybody's pattern. So on the other side of the coin, we might have someone who is, let's just call it in scarcity. And this is whenever we talk about money, we now hear abundance and scarcity, and that abundance is inherently good and scarcity is inherently bad. And if you just have more abundant thoughts, then money's going to flow your way and all of this stuff. I actually like to tell people that those concepts are neutral. Abundance is not inherently good. Scarcity is not inherently bad. And if we can reframe, like scarcity might just mean, hey, I'm a good steward of my wealth and I'm careful with my money. That is a positive reframe on scarcity. We just need to be aware of, okay, when is this actually being limiting? And so here's a great example is I was with a guy not too long ago who, worth tens of millions of dollars. So very successful entrepreneur. And we happened to be getting ice cream. And we were with my kids. We were getting ice cream and they had toppings. And he got vanilla ice cream and they asked him if he wanted any toppings. And he was like, oh, yeah, I'll take chocolate chips and sprinkles and nuts, whatever. And they were like, oh, it's 25 cents a piece. And then he was like, oh, never mind. And I was like, whoa, why never mind? Like you just kept yourself from having a better experience over 75 cents. And this makes zero sense with your net worth, right? You could get toppings on ice cream for the rest of your life and never notice the difference. So like, where is that coming from? Like, how do we snap out of that and repattern? And it really is just taking a pause and going, hey, so the first thing I like to do is ascertain information to go, hey, is this true? So does 75 cents actually matter, when I look at my balance sheet? Okay, no. Great. So that's our first answer, right? Is that this behavior is incongruent with reality or the facts. So once we ascertain the facts, now it's diving into, okay, then where is this programming coming from? Where is this idea that I can't afford the toppings on my ice cream? Where is that rooted? And it's probably rooted in some childhood story. Either you watched your parents do the same thing and then mimic that behavior, or there was someone telling you that you weren't ever able to have those things because that's frivolous, or there's some, even back to, I think the biggest money story all of us have, rich people are evil,
Mm.
right? This is as deep, it runs as deep in our civilization. It's in our religious texts. It's from the earliest of days. People that hoard resources are evil. And so if we believe that at our core, we will do anything to make sure that we do not become evil. And if that is spending all of the money that we're making, like that's exactly what we'll do in order to keep ourselves from landing in that story. So it's unwinding those beliefs once we've ascertained the facts. And that's the two-step process there.
Mm. The ice cream thing is still blowing my mind. Did he wind up? Please tell us. Everybody is wanting to know. I can feel it from listeners and the viewers. Did he get the toppings on the ice cream after all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but the more important part is not only did he get the ice cream, did he get the toppings? Like it elicited this awesome conversation of where this was coming from, and he was able to identify 10 different places in his life where he was limiting his joy because he was afraid of really falling into that rich people are evil thing. So he was driving this crappy car, even though he had his eye on a Tesla for many years. And all of these things, he had stories about why he wasn't able to have those. And ultimately, it comes down to some sort of deserving, right?
Mm.
Like a lot of us will keep ourselves from the things that we truly want because we don't believe that we deserve them at the core.
Mm. Yeah, and so much of it, to your earlier point about historically money is the root of all evil, or people who have money are evil. It also has to do with our socioeconomic and our home situation. There was somebody I knew where his father grew up with rats. They named the rats that they slept next to. And even though this person was very successful and made a lot of money, would penny pinch to the dime because he was always had this fear of being like his father and winding up in a situation with 3 brothers and feeding the rats and naming them. And
Yep.
so there's that whole societal element and our familial element, and genetically, I'm sure from an epigenetic, or not epigenetics, but from a genetic standpoint, I know they've done studies that if you come from generations where people were impoverished, then that's something that might be even pre-programmed in. So how do we reprogram our brains? How do we reprogram our consciousness? And I love what you've shared with us so far today, Mike. Are there any questions or anything I didn't get to ask you that you feel would be helpful or meaningful to our viewers and listeners today?
No, look, you've done a great job, and I think you get it, right? Of like, how do we identify these stories and then start to repattern them? But one of my favorite questions is just asking, how did I grow up in relation to money? Like, what did I witness from my parents in relation to money? And that word witness is really important because it's not necessarily what your parents told you, but what did they do and say around money? And it can be very different between mother and father, right? And once we start observing that, where is that showing up in your life? And these questions can really start to unravel these stories very quickly. And if you're interested, if you find yourself either on the one side of the spectrum, not allowing yourself to enjoy ice cream toppings, or on the far other side of deploying all of your capital as soon as it hits your bank account. Either way, if you can start unwinding from those questions, I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, curiosity. It's about being curious. And another thing I'm minded to share with all of us right now is to not be a victim of our money stories. I remember one of the greatest opportunities for my growth that led to me being an entrepreneur years later was I went to my father. I was 20 years old and I was just about to graduate college. And God bless my parents that helped to pay for college, which I deeply appreciated. However, through a series of little miracles, my grandfather, when I was 16, had gotten me a $200 limit credit card, which again, he'd like load with $200 and yippee, I used to be able to buy myself ice cream or whatever it was. And so by the time, Mike, I was 18 years old, unbeknownst to my parents or grandparents or anybody, I was given two $20,000 limit credit cards because I now had this great credit that I had been building from 16 years old. And I didn't know what to do with money. I didn't have any talk about money stories. I had no concept of what money was, how to spend it. I was taking all my friends to five-star hotels, dinners, collecting wine. I didn't know what to do. And then come one day, I was $40,000 in debt, not from student loans, but from credit card debt. And I will always remember going to my father at the back of the house by this little pond they had, and I said, "Dad, I need your help. I'm 20,000 or $40,000 in debt. Could I have a $10,000 loan and I'll repay you for it?" And my dad said, "No, no, you can't. You got yourself into this mess. You have to get yourself out of it." And it was one of the most heart-wrenching things. It was like somebody punched me in the gut, and yet it taught me resilience. It taught me that I needed to go out there and learn how to be successful, how to make money, how to manage money, and it changed my life that my dad said no. So I share that to say if you have perhaps money trauma, if there's something that occurs for you as traumatic or maybe where you were the victim in a situation, I invite you to look at it through a new lens, to ask yourself instead of, why did this happen to me? Ask yourself, how did this happen for me? And I just feel called to share that with everybody. So, Mike, where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about your wisdom and unbreakable wealth and the wonderful work you're doing in the world?
Yes, I share a lot on Instagram. My handle is mbrown.co. And then my favorite thing I get to do every week is write my weekly newsletter. It's completely free. You can find that at unbreakablewealth.com/newsletter. Sign up for some of my best stories and hard-hitting insights as to what's going on with our money stories. That comes out every Friday. Love to have you on the newsletter. And yeah, appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much. We've had Mike Brown here, the creator of Unbreakable Wealth, investor, prior Navy veteran. Thank you, Mike, for your service to our country, to your service to humanity, for being here to help us illuminate all of the ways that we might be unconsciously living our life around money. And I invite each and every one of us to pull the curtain back like the Wizard of Oz, look behind the curtain of your money story and get curious. Is this what you are committed to? And if not, be the new author of your money story. I'm Jennifer Cahill, and I thank you for your time, your listening, and for being here with us.